The New Orleans Saints lose another key piece on defense with the retirement of Malcolm Jenkins. How will they replace him? We'll talk Tyrann Mathieu, in-house options, and my favorite NFL draft late round prospect of the year. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. The big news of the day, Malcolm Jenkins retiring after 13 seasons in the NFL. We'll talk about his career. We'll talk about what this means for the New Orleans Saints defense over the coming shows. But right now, I want to focus on what it is that the New Orleans Saints can do to replace him. And it's a lot to replace, but there is one key free agent that we all know and love out there that the Saints could try to lure back to New Orleans. Replacing Malcolm Jenkins, not going to be easy, right? This is a guy that played 2,651 NFL snaps in a row, the absolute quintessential NFL Iron Man, over 130 games in a row as well, a streak that was just broken last year due to the whole COVID game that took place up against the Miami Dolphins. And of course, he also led the New Orleans Saints in defensive snaps in 2021 at the age of 34 in what would be his final NFL season. So when you're looking for somebody to replace Malcolm Jenkins, you're not just looking for a good safety. You're not just looking for somebody that can play the position. You're looking for a leader. You're looking for an excellent communicator, and you're looking for a guy that loves the game and can be a leader for the guys that are around him on the field. And all of that leads me to, of course, Tyrann Mathieu, who is a New Orleans native, has expressed before that he doesn't really have a lot of interest in playing in his hometown, but those feelings have kind of changed over the course of the years since he made that statement, and now there's a prime opportunity. The New Orleans Saints and Tyrann Mathieu were connected early on in the offseason. Multiple reports coming out saying that there was mutual interest there. There is absolutely no way that Malcolm Jenkins' retirement was not something that the New Orleans Saints knew before March 30th. And in fact, Luke Johnson of NOLA.com actually reporting that as well, that this wasn't a surprise to the New Orleans Saints. So depending upon how early they knew, that may explain the mutual interest that at least at one point reportedly existed between the Saints and Mathieu. What is it that Tyrann Mathieu brings you that you've lost with Malcolm Jenkins? He's an excellent communicator. He's very experienced. He's played 9 seasons in the NFL, and he's somebody that gives you the versatility that a Malcolm Jenkins gives you as well. He's somebody that can cover. He's somebody that can stand up and run defense. He's somebody that can play close to the line of scrimmage, but then also bail into some split safety looks, right? Neither Malcolm Jenkins or Tyrann Mathieu are going to be single high deep safeties. That's what you brought Marcus Maye in for, though we'll talk about an interesting circumstance that could take place around that in the next segment as well. But Tyrann Mathieu also gives you somebody that can blitz off the edge, somebody that can be physical with big-bodied tight ends, that can be shifty enough to work against some of those quicker, faster slot receivers. So there's a couple of different things that he gives you that you actually might get a little bit of improvement out of when it comes to Malcolm Jenkins' level of play at his age. Tyrann Mathieu in May turns 30 years old. He gives you 4 years younger, 5 years younger than you would have had with Malcolm Jenkins on the field in 2022. But what you lose with Malcolm Jenkins, and the hard part to replace, is going to be the cerebral nature, the football IQ, as well as, of course, the off-field stuff, right? His ability to lead a potentially fractured locker room, when Drew Brees went off and did his Yahoo Finance interview, for instance, and things like that. So there are these other ancillary pieces, these sort of intangible pieces that you are going to lose with Malcolm Jenkins no matter what. And regardless of who it is that you get to replace him, it's a little bit of a tall task to ask to replace half of your starting secondary or 2/5 of your starting secondary. You've got Marshon Lattimore, you've got Paulson Adebo at your corners, maybe Bradley Roby competes there a little bit. You've got CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot. Maybe Bradley Roby gets some opportunity there as well. But both of your safeties, Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins, are now gone. So replacing both of them create some issues with communication that could be there for a group that just got a lot younger and a group that just got a lot more inexperienced with one another. So that's why bringing in a veteran here makes a ton of sense, like bringing in a guy like Tyrann Mathieu. Now, Tyrann Mathieu's in Baton Rouge right now. He's spending the week with LSU. Just come on down the I-10, hour, 20 minutes, 50 minutes if my mama's driving, and we'll get you all set up, taken care of. Come on home, honey badger. Let's get you taken care of. Now, it's going to be tough, right? I mean, you're looking deep into free agency at this point. No one knows at this point what the honey badger or Tyrann Mathieu's asking price is. That, of course, factors in. The Saints ended up saving a little bit of money at safety with Marcus Williams getting a $14 million deal in one place in Baltimore Ravens, and then they signed a $9.5 million per year deal with Marcus Maye. So, $6 million there makes a big difference. So depending upon Tyrann Mathieu's asking price, as well as his willingness to play in New Orleans, which he and CD Deuce, CJ Gardner-Johnson, have been going back and forth on Twitter a little bit, something to watch. I don't usually talk about Twitter, but when you've got, some recruiting happening, some recruiting happening on Twitter like that, and you see him responding with the prayers up, fingers crossed emojis, you get a little bit excited if you're a Saints fan, and I completely understand that. So there is going to be a lot to watch here. The New Orleans Saints could go this route, which feels very much not like the New Orleans Saints, right? To go out there and make a big signing like this. Tyrann Mathieu's a marquee name left on the market at this point late in free agency. So can they get the price to come down depending upon what that asking price is? But there's absolutely no doubt that if you can get Tyrann Mathieu in the black and gold, he replaces and even improves in some places just based upon what you can project the 2022 year to look like for a 30-year-old safety versus a 35-year-old safety. He improves some of the play that you might get on the field. But can you get that cerebral piece of it back? Can you get the mental part of it back in the game? And can you find a way to make sure that this secondary operates as cohesively and as connected as they did in 2021 here in 2022 with two big new pieces? Tyrann Mathieu helps you do that, but doesn't answer all the questions. And of course, Tyrann Mathieu isn't the only option for the New Orleans Saints. They actually have some in-house options and some familiar options, which if we know anything about the New Orleans Saints, familiarity means a lot, that they could go to as well. So talk PJ Williams and even the possibility of moving CJ Gardner-Johnson and why one of those options is much better than the other. We'll break down some of those in-house possibilities as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get there, we got the Final Four this weekend. It is a big one, especially if you're a UNC or a Duke fan. This is what you've been dreaming of, right? To get this. So if you want to go ahead, put a little bit of skin in the game, get a little bit in on the action, make it a little bit more exciting, BetOnline is the place to do it. Our exclusive online betting partners over at betonline.net. You can get on those odds as well as the championship odds because you'll still have one more round after that. You can get in on the women's tournament, pro basketball. And if you're not into betting on basketball, that's fine. You got some NFL props and futures you can get into, Super Bowl, conference, division. You look at baseball coming up right around the corner. Opening day is right there. You can almost touch it. So there's so much that you can get in on over at betonline.net, including, of course, the best place for all of your sports betting news, analysis, and podcasts. So check them out over at betonline.net, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Some in-house and familiar options exist for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to replacing Malcolm Jenkins. So let's break some of those down. As always, I thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget about that Locked On NFL YouTube page, Locked On NFL podcast as well. Everything you need from around the NFL in less than 30 minutes. So Malcolm Jenkins retires. We talked about Tyrann Mathieu, the potential of bringing him in. Again, doesn't feel like a very New Orleans Saints move, but hey, maybe this is a new New Orleans Saints, right? Maybe this is an opportunity now for them to really win the fan base over and patch over some things that they might need to patch over at this point in the offseason, right? I know fans are a little disappointed at the inactivity so far. This could be a big, big move for them. But if they don't want to go that route and they want to stick with familiarity, they have some very good options. And there's three ways in-house that they could go about this. We'll start with the most direct route. Most direct route, re-sign PJ Williams, put him in Malcolm Jenkins' role. There's some issues here, right? There are some concerns that would come from this. But the big thing that you would get is a defensive back that has already operated in the slot, on the outside, and at free safety that is now coming in. And instead of you having to reteach the language of your secondary, Dennis Allen, Chris Richard, to two players, you only have to do it with one, and that's Marcus Maye. You get PJ Williams back, you plug him into Malcolm Jenkins' role. It's a new role for him, right? He hasn't played more than just about 60 snaps in the box, but has played triple digits in the slot basically every season. And of course has the experience of backing up Marcus Williams at free safety. So it gives him an understanding of how to work with the other safety, which would then influence him and sort of help him understand what he needs to do in that role. So that's a more direct route, right? You go out there, you sign Tyrann Mathieu, you plug him into Malcolm Jenkins' role. If you don't want to do that because you want to stick with familiarity, then great, you go get PJ Williams, you plug him into Malcolm Jenkins' role. Let me be very clear about PJ Williams, though. No matter what you do, re-signing PJ Williams just got a lot more important for the success of the New Orleans Saints defense and their secondary in particular, even just from a depth perspective in conversation. Okay, that's option one. Another option, if you're not really comfortable with the idea of putting PJ Williams in that role, which, to be fair, he has not played yet in his career, you could re-sign PJ Williams, plug him in at free safety in Marcus Williams' spot, and take Marcus Maye and then plug him in Malcolm Jenkins' role. And I know what you're thinking, Ross, what's wrong with you? The idea of bringing in Marcus Maye was to cover for Marcus Williams. But don't forget that in Robert Saleh's defense last year for the New York Jets, Maye played a lot more in the box. Now, he wasn't as successful in that role as he was earlier on in his career as a roaming, rangy free safety, but was that the first year? Was that because it was the first year that he played that role? Was it because of Robert Saleh's system? Could Marcus Maye be more successful in Dennis Allen's system playing in the box? He's a fantastic tackler, right? So there are a couple of ways that you could go about this, and both of which include PJ Williams, right? So that's why I say either way, getting PJ Williams back is a big deal. Now, I personally feel a lot more comfortable with Marcus Maye staying in that free safety, or getting back to, that roaming, rangy free safety role, and then finding your solution at the strong safety, sort of box safety spot. One of the ways that the Saints could also achieve that, and this is option number 3, which doesn't necessarily include PJ Williams, but would be a good idea to bring him back for depth, would be to move CJ Gardner-Johnson there. Now, CJ Gardner-Johnson is one of the better slot defenders, nickel cornerbacks in the NFL. There's no arguing that, right? The numbers are there. So I would be a little bit hesitant to do this. However, what we do know is that where CJ Gardner-Johnson does struggle, and when he does struggle, it comes at the few times in which he has struggled against shiftier, speedier, quicker wide receivers. Chris Godwin, Robbie Anderson operating out of the slot. Those have been the moments where he's not necessarily at his best. Where is he at his best? Going toe-to-toe with more physical receivers or tight ends, blitzing off the edge, and in run support, as well as dropping back into coverage, into zone moments. So putting him in Malcolm Jenkins' role would allow him to maximize those 4 pieces while taking him away from the responsibility of having to deal with those quicker, smaller, shiftier, short area quickness type slot receivers. And instead, you put Bradley Roby in that role, who extended his contract with the New Orleans Saints and is sticking around in New Orleans. So you have the pieces available to do that. Again, re-sign PJ Williams in the midst of all this so that you have the depth that you need. That's another route that the Saints can go. Out of all of those, my favorite route, aside from the Tyrann Mathieu route, of course, is, and this, of course, being more realistic, right? Talking about familiarity is a little bit more realistic when it comes to the Saints, is probably just bringing back PJ Williams and then figuring out the shift in the responsibilities at the 2 safety spots between he and Marcus Maye, and finding out which of those 2 pieces of that formula can work better. I like CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot. I would be afraid to disrupt that. I would imagine Dennis Allen would be a little hesitant to disrupt that as well. So I don't know if that's necessarily the route that they go. But if they bring back PJ Williams and they get the opportunity to at least work all of these things out in-house and make the best decision that they can over the course of the offseason by seeing it with their own eyes, that's a big piece. I'll tell you right now, what won't happen is Daniel Sorensen stepping into Malcolm Jenkins' role. Daniel Sorensen is a special teams player. Dennis Allen said it himself. He has come in. He is here in New Orleans to basically step into Jeff Heath's role, who is a special teams guy and a depth guy. So that's what Daniel Sorensen's role is going to be. You're not going to take Daniel Sorensen, who missed 25% of his tackles last year with the Kansas City Chiefs, and plug him into a place where you need a secure tackler like Malcolm Jenkins. So number 1, Tyrann Mathieu. Number 2, PJ Williams, Marcus Maye, however that all works. Number 3, moving CJ Gardner-Johnson. And all the way down the list at 10, 11, or 12 is the Daniel Sorensen idea. Now, most of the options in between there all come down to the NFL draft. So we're going to spotlight some of the NFL draft box safeties day 2 and 3 in tomorrow's episode, as well as take a look at the contract implications of this Malcolm Jenkins retirement. But today, I want to focus on, with our friend Darian Gray from the Locked On HBCU podcast, my favorite late round prospect in this draft, safety Marquis Bell from FAMU, who could be an immediate plug and play person in place of Malcolm Jenkins. We're going to break it down with Darrion as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a visit from our good friend from Locked On HBCU, Darian Gray. He and I actually recorded this before Malcolm Jenkins retired. We focused specifically on Marquis Bell of FAMU, fantastic safety that I absolutely love, is one of Darion's guys as well. We've decided he is our guy. And I think that he could be one of these late round prospects that the Saints could bring in to either step into Malcolm Jenkins' role now or in the future if they do a one-year stopgap type of situation. Again, we recorded this before Jenkins retired, so you're going to hear us acknowledge the Jenkins retirement as a possibility. The Jenkins retirement has now happened, so everything that you learn about Marquis Bell should be something that makes you a little bit excited about him going into this year's draft. You've come at me about this guy a couple times, saying I've been stealing your thunder, I'm stealing your draft takes, everything like that. So here's your chance to hold my feet to the fire and talk a little bit about. I'll be nice. I'll call him your guy for right now. FAMU safety Marquis Bell. How he potentially fits in on the New Orleans Saints over on the defensive side.
First off, you're just being accurate. You're not being nice. You're being accurate. Okay, that is my guy. All right. Now, I wish I could flip this camera. I have my favorite number is 5. I've been very open about my love for the number 5. I have a 5 jersey hanging up in my room, because that was my little league number, has my name on it. Yes, so that is my guy, Marquis Bell, number 5 out of FAMU. But this is not about me. This isn't about you. This is about one of the best safeties in the FCS. This guy is so freaking talented. And I just did an episode about him on Monday where I was talking about how I felt like he had kind of fell down draft boards, but he had a really good combine. And we'll talk about him as a player, but I want to first show some of the traits that I think made people go back to the film and see what he's really about. And that is the fact that he ran a 4.4 140. There was some draft profiles from Lance Zierlein, I believe, who said he had tight hips. Well, in the field work, he kind of got rid of that. He showed to have really good hips, and I think that went a long way, because I said something, I think it might be controversial, but you have to hear me out.
All right. All right, here we go.
The emphasis on the coverage of HBCUs, the timing of it, I think kind of hampered or changed the way people think about Marquis Bell.
Oh,
that
for sure.
Sounds ridiculous.
No,
sounds
I hear
ridiculous. But the fact is, in this season, he was a run-stopping machine, had 15 tackles on multiple occasions. Yes, he can do that. But people don't value those kind of safeties like they used to. They just do not. And it's something that I've been very vocal about on Locked On HBCU, right? But in the year prior, in 2019, he had 5 interceptions, led the MEAC in interceptions. So it was a situation where he can do both, but all eyes were on the HBCU landscape and Marquis Bell when he was doing what I perceived to be the less valued attribute. So I think that some people just say he's a run stopper as if he can't play in coverage. Maybe not a single high, but definitely a 2 deep safety set. I think he could do that a lot.
That's a really, really good point, right? When did we start paying a ton of attention to these draft prospects, especially after last year when no HBCU talent was taken in the draft at all? We expect that to change dramatically this year. That's a really, really great point. And I think that, like, you look at Marquis Bell's skill set, even as a guy that can play in the box, but that can also cover. And you know where that gives me value when I look at the New Orleans Saints? It's in the Malcolm Jenkins role. Malcolm Jenkins did something really, really interesting this offseason to where he let the last 2 years of his contract, this year in 2023, took a pay cut all the way down to vet minimum, but didn't restructure his contract, right? There was nothing else that he did there. That tends to signal, or has signaled in the past, maybe that there's some retirement being mulled a little bit here. And if that's the case, a guy like Marquis Bell makes a ton of sense to either immediately plug into that role or plug into that role for a year behind a stopgap or something like that. Get adjusted to the NFL speed, stuff like that. Things that are good for all college players, not just HBCU players. And so I think that that's really, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like that's the place where he fits really well. He can play in the box, he can play in the slot, and you can use him in those zone deep coverages as a split safety in cover 2, cover 4 situations.
Yeah, that is exactly where he fits.
One more big thank you to Darian Gray at South Exclusives on Twitter, host of Locked On HBCU podcast. Go and show Darian some love. He does a phenomenal job over at the show. Coming up on tomorrow's episode, we've got more Malcolm Jenkins talk to get into. We're going to take a look at NFL draft prospects, some more of those box safeties that could have an immediate impact at the position should the Saints decide to go that route. We're going to talk about what this loss means for the New Orleans Saints from a salary cap perspective, but also we're going to answer a big question. Will the New Orleans Saints defense be good in 2022, or have they lost too many pieces? I'm going to give you my thoughts tomorrow on Locked On Saints. I appreciate you as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out for your second listen today that fantastic Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Eric Crocker, as well as Ryan Tracy, giving you everything you need to know around the NFL Draft. Might be a good day to tune in to listen to some safety talk as well. So go and check them out wherever you get your podcast. Thanks, y'all, as always, making me a part of your day, part of your routine. For everything you need in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.